Dun, 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 dun. We have the spy weapons. So I'm going to head over to the event schematics because if you're watching this as of release, the spy schematics are in the game. And there are 6 new weapons added upon release. And I think the one that pretty much everybody is curious about is the pepper sprayer. And we're going to get into that in just a second. I'm going to cover all 5 of these other weapons, and that is tough for me to say because as I speak it, I am now being held to it. But I'm very motivated to actually cover all of these weapons on the channel. I really want to give all of them their time in the spotlight, and we're going to be starting with the pepper sprayer simply because it's black and is an SMG and has good DPS. Am I reminding anybody of anything? Yeah, the Silent Specter is kind of the king. I hate to say that because there's so many great weapons in the game, as will be the theme of this video, and it's kind of on par with the Bobcat, and it's been the topic of much debate. But the Silent Specter seems to win in all-around usability because it's got good fire rate, crit damage, crit rating. I mean, it's got a base 20%, which is huge. I mean, it's just good in like almost every way. Like, you don't even need a reload perk because it has a base 2-second reload time. 2 seconds is what you shoot for when you put a reload perk on a weapon. So to have 2 seconds by default is amazing. And oh look, 1.5 seconds, and this doesn't even have a reload perk. So the pepper sprayer is interesting. So some gameplay, it's pretty good. It compares. I ran the math, and I hate to say the numbers just because, I don't want to rank weapons, but realistically, it seems to fall about 25% short of the Silent Specter. In a party of maxed out people, I was getting about 411,000 DPS with the Silent Specter. I mean, pretty good, but the pepper sprayer was getting about 330,000 DPS once all the crit rating, crit damage perks were factored in, and it was not done with this schematic, mind you. I used a better schematic. I'll show you the one that was given to me. I was going off of this, which was in my humble yet not really humble because I run the numbers on this stuff a lot opinion. This is, I think, the highest damage output you can get. Of course, physical would technically be the highest damage output, and I didn't actually factor the physical perks because I wanted it to be apples to apples, energy on energy versus the Silent Specter, even though any other element would have been the same. It seems to fall about 25% short of the Spectre. Now, don't fret, because that 6th perk might be a savior, and we will get into that in a second, but ultimately, it seems to be really, really controllable. Really, really good stuff comes with it right off the bat. Now, you can run all of these damage perks, because it doesn't really kind of need a mag size, and I say that tentatively because base 34 is higher than 30, as you might know, but that 4 bullets it's nice. It really is nice, and when you run something like Assault Ammo Recovery, which is something I've used a lot. I should probably show it if I'm going to be talking about it. It's nice to have because, that 4 bullets in the magazine could be a whole extra shot when you're shooting in a crowd. But it's really, it's nice to have. It's nice to have a 34, which is a bit different than usual. 9.9 fire rate is a bit lower, and I think that might actually be a part of its downfall because I think it has very comparable stats to the Silent Spectre, and I hate to spend so much of this video comparing the two, but they're just very similar, and I know that it's going to come up. It's been asked to me several times. It has higher damage, lower fire rate, and it seems to work out a little bit less in its favor. Now, enough about the Silent Spectre. This weapon is very, very interesting for a lot of reasons. So obviously the spy weapon set has those interesting 6th perks. It is my understanding that there are 3 brand new ones. We have the standing in place for 2 seconds, grants 11% plus damage, stacking up to 5 times. And the way that I understand this is that after 10 seconds, you will have a full 55% damage buff. And upon switching your weapon / moving at all, you will remove that effect. Now that stacking up to 5 times every 2 seconds is consistent among all of them. You can get affliction damage on these weapons, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe you can get slowed and snared because I think somebody handed me a shotgun with slowed and snared. And then your other options are 17% extra damage to mist monsters stacking up to 5 times, and I'm not even sure if I have one of these, but the other one is 10% shield stacking up to 5 times, which is really interesting. And that's where this weapon set is kind of starting to lose me. I think it's awesome to have new variety. These weapons are really, really good, and they do work in the end game, which is why I was hesitant to say the numbers comparing to the Silent Spectre earlier, because the weapons will work. I use them. They're great. At least the pepper sprayer works completely fine. It's very good. And that damage bonus, it sucks. It sucks. I usually sugarcoat it. I like to be a very positive YouTuber, but I hate it. I really hate it because the quote-unquote meta for using these weapons is like standing on the end of your trap tunnels, not moving at all. Because if you even tap, your controller stick or ADWS, like, you will just instantly remove this buff, and it takes 10 seconds to get it back of complete lack of movement. It's insane, and it's so boring. I'm sorry, guys at Epic. I don't know who came up with this, but to stand in place for 10 straight seconds, not doing nothing but not being able to move, means you're so exposed, you're so vulnerable. And in the shotgun video, we're not there yet, but in the shotgun video, I'm going to advise heavily against using this, because that extra damage will never happen in a shotgun loadout. You should never be standing there, because if you're even within range to be doing capable damage, you're just going to get slapped. You're just going to get smacked by whatever's next to you. They will move you. You will lose that damage buff. The slowed and snare that was given to me is probably your best bet, and partially what I'm going to recommend for these. Now, I say partially because I think the shield one has some value, because if you can just back off, stand still, and regenerate your shield faster, that's really great. If you're using Blast from the Past, it's irrelevant because you won't have a shield, but if you use a loadout like Totally Rockin' Out or something that gives you all that extra shield bonus, that could be really, really nice. And of course, the Mist Monster one it's a potentially nice one. That 17% damage is pretty big. That gets up pretty high, and to have that against a Smasher or a mini boss especially can be really nice. You're often standing still for a mini boss, but if it rounds the corner, then you no longer have a line of sight, and your entire bonus is null and void because it's not even hitting the target. So yeah, I don't want to just complain. I don't want to just bitch and moan about it, but I do have a proposal, because this is supposed to be the spy set, right? You're supposed to be like super sneaky agent mode while you're using these weapons. So maybe instead of just not moving, what if like every 2 seconds it summons like a field or like a center point or an HQ, if you will, where you're actually getting that damage bonus, and then as you move out of that area, it fades away and like your damage buff goes down by a tier or so. That way you can run back into it, or even, strafe left and right within that very small circle, and you can still get your damage bonus without actually, being a freaking statue. I hate this. This is so, like, why are you encouraging me to stand still? That is the opposite of how I and most other players play. I feel like, if I'm wrong, let me know. Maybe I'm a loon and this is really good. I know that on a long range weapon like the Grunt, standing still, getting that 55% damage bonus, which, by the way, is applied to your base damage as far as I understand it. I don't think that it crits on top of that, so it's not a true 55% damage bonus. After the crits do their work with a crit build like this, it's really more of like a 20%, maybe 30% actual damage buff, but it's significant enough to try to go for it. If you're using a long-range weapon, it's great, but these SMGs aren't going to be hitting nearly as far as this one. At least the effective range is not nearly as much, so it's kind of a bummer that 6 perk is there, but I've spent so much talking about it. Let's actually get into the best perks. I'm sorry that I spent so long on this. It's one of those things where, because this is the first weapon in the set that I'm covering, I kind of just had to let all that out. So the best perks are extremely situational. This is more or less of a Frankenstein of what I got. I got crit rating triple damage on this, so crit damage was all I could afford at the time, and I am now recommending a lot of different things. So it really does depend on what you want. If you want consistent damage output, I would go mag size, fire rate, damage, and then match this 5th perk to your 6th perk. Now, that is my true recommendation. As of now, I really don't think standing still is a really good damage bonus. You can use it, that's fine, it'll work, but I wouldn't personally recommend it. If you want to go for that, that's going to buff all of your different loadouts. That extra damage is great. I just throw in a damage perk down here if you want. But I think either the shield, if you don't use Blast from the Past, or unfortunately just typical slowed and snared or affliction, because if you can get the 45% damage to afflicted or slowed and snared, that's a great bonus. That's an excellent damage bonus. Now, that was just consistent damage output. Now, if you want to go for what I think would be a better damage output, it is probably a crit rating crit damage build, because with a weapon that's firing about, okay, let's round up, 10 times per second, it's going to be an extremely smooth experience to run crit rating crit damage, and this is the loadout that I would personally go for, okay? This is probably what I'm going to end on. I'm not entirely certain, but in my experience, having that at 75% mag size, plus, as I mentioned, the assault ammo recovery, you're going to be shooting for about twice as long with his team perk and mag size combined. And to shoot twice as long is a lot better than a 30% damage perk, which, by the way, because crit kind of stacks separately than damage, a 30% damage in a crit build is effectively like a 15% damage buff. It's really not nearly as much as you'd think. So what I would probably go for as a nice, like, rounded build that'll allow you to shoot for a long time is mag size, crit damage, and crit rating down here. I think that's what I would go for in the end game, but if you want to go for maximum damage, as I showed, double crit damage, crit rating, and damage is an excellent way to go, assuming that you don't have that 6th perk. If you do have a 6th perk for slowed and snared, snare targets or affliction, then damage to afflict or slowed and snared is always going to be better than damage, and you don't want a 2nd crit rating because of the diminishing returns. I think a 2nd crit rating is, I'm going off of old numbers here, but it's less than damage. I think it's like a 20-something% damage buff. Don't quote me on that. I know that it's less than damage. It's really not worth it to go for that. So I would highly recommend something along those lines. Double crit damage is probably a constant here. Crit rating or mag size, put the crit rating down here. It's kind of tricky because of how they laid things out here. Or you could go for a fire rate, crit rating, crit damage, which would make you shoot very, very fast, give you great time to kill. You'd be mowing stuff down at the cost of having to reload often. So if you're going to put fire rate on this thing, I'd probably recommend putting it up here, put your crit rating down here, and then put in a mag size perk, because if you're going to go fire rate, you are going to drain the mag. I'm sorry if that confused some of you guys. This is one of those weapons where there are so many combinations where raw damage, crit rating, double crit damage, and damage is probably the best way you're going to be able to go about it. Of course, your 6th perk, if you match it, is going to be better than damage, but damage isn't always the full story, because even with a 34 mag size, if you're shooting 9.9 shots per second, you're just going to have to be reloading too often, which honestly probably isn't that bad with a 1.5 reload. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been the best perks on the pepper sprayer. It's definitely an it depends situation, but I think this is going to be an amazing weapon nonetheless. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys want to see next, and have a nice day.